Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're venturing into the historical bedrock of wealth and civilization, Babylon. You were curious about the reality behind the richest man in Babylon. And, well, that's exactly where we're headed.
Yeah, it's a great starting point.
Our mission is to go beyond just the parables and, unearth the truly astonishing story of this ancient city, drawing directly from the sources you shared.
It's fascinating, isn't it? I mean, the name Babylon just conjures up images of immense riches, almost legendary.
Totally legendary.
But when you actually look at the environment, the place where this city grew up, its success seems, well, pretty improbable.
Absolutely. Think about the geography your sources describe.
Yeah.
A flat, arid valley right beside the Euphrates River.
Right.
Not exactly a promising start. No natural forests for timber, no mines for metals, not even really a natural spot on a major trade route.
And the rainfall.
Yeah, plus the rainfall was hardly enough to sustain large-scale farming. You'd almost write it off, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
As a place destined for, well, not much.
Precisely. And that's a really crucial insight from your material, I think. Babylon's prosperity wasn't just luck, not geographical luck anyway.
So it was built, not found.
It was entirely man-developed and man-made. Every bit of their eventual wealth, their influence, it was a direct result of human effort, human ingenuity.
Okay, so they're facing some serious environmental challenges. But your sources do highlight those two key natural assets. You've got the fertile soil and you've got the water from the Euphrates.
That's the starting point.
But how did they turn that into a civilization that, still echoes today?
That's where the real story begins. What's truly remarkable, I think, is how they tackled those limitations head on.
They didn't just cope.
No, they didn't just adapt. They fundamentally rewrote the rules of their environment on a massive scale.
Okay, let's unpack this monumental effort. The Babylonian engineers, and your sources are clear, this was one of history's earliest major engineering feats.
Right, really foundational.
They essentially redirected the Euphrates River. We're talking dams, a whole network of immense irrigation canals spreading across that entire dry valley.
It's almost impossible to really grasp the planning, the execution involved, especially so early in history.
Yeah, the sheer scale.
It truly was transformative. Think about the organization needed just to conceive and then build a system like that. This wasn't just about getting water to crops. It was about creating the conditions for abundance where it shouldn't naturally exist.
Right, creating the potential.
And the impact was pretty immediate. It led to crop yields unlike anything seen before. That surplus, that became the bedrock of their economy, their power.
And it seems their engineering skills didn't stop there either. Your sources also mention a later, equally impressive drainage system near the mouths of the Tigris and Euphrates.
Yeah, they essentially reclaimed swampland, turned it into even more farmland.
That's like doubling down on innovation. Land management on another level.
Exactly. It really speaks to a sustained commitment to engineering solutions over time. And here's a fact from your sources that kind of brings the scale home. Remnants of these ancient canals, they still exist today.
Really?
Yeah, some so wide that apparently a dozen horses could ride side by side along the bottom.
Wow. That gives you a real sense of the immensity. Puts their achievements right up there with maybe even beyond some modern systems.
Definitely comparable when you think about the tools they had.
That's just staggering. You picture these ancient engineers, probably with pretty simple tools by our standards, achieving something that rivals modern projects. So, okay, they've secured their food supply through this incredible engineering. What other factors played into Babylon's long, prosperous run?
Well, your sources point to something maybe less concrete, but just as vital, the nature of their leadership.
The kings.
Right. Babylon, over its long history, seems to have benefited from a succession of kings who actually prioritized wisdom, enterprise, justice.
That's interesting. It's a fascinating contrast to the typical image we might have, of ancient rulers just focused on conquest and plunder.
It really is. Your sources even use that phrase, no strutting monarchs who sought to conquer the known world just for ego's sake.
Yeah, I saw that. It really reframes things, doesn't it?
It does. So while they weren't entirely peaceful, the sources do mention wars, local conflicts, defensive wars.
Sure, people would covet that wealth.
Exactly. But it seems their primary focus was often on internal development, maintaining stability, managing that wealth they'd created.
It's a powerful idea, isn't it? That focusing inward on development and stability can actually be a stronger engine for long-term prosperity than just constant expansion.
A lesson maybe many later empires didn't quite learn. These leaders, it seems, created an environment where innovation, trade, all that stuff could really flourish.
Absolutely. Good governance, a stable environment, seems like it was just as crucial as the canals. But as we know, even the greatest civilizations don't last forever. Your sources detail the eventual decline, the abandonment of Babylon. What happened there?
The key takeaway seems to be a kind of gradual erosion, those energizing human forces, as the sources put it.
The drive, the focus.
Yeah, that initial drive that built everything. Once that focus on innovation, on diligent maintenance of the infrastructure, on that wise governance, once that waned, the city's foundations just weakened over time.
Right, and just to place it for us geographically, where exactly was this incredibly influential city? Your sources give some interesting modern parallels.
Yeah, it was in Asia, about 600 miles east of the Suez Canal, just north of the Persian Gulf.
Okay.
And interestingly, its latitude was around 30 degrees north. That puts it on a similar line as, say, Yuma, Arizona.
Oh.
And it shared a similar climate, hot, dry.
So even the location itself reinforces that idea of man-made success. It wasn't an easy place to thrive.
Not naturally, no. It really emphasizes their achievements were born out of human will, human ingenuity.
And the contrast between its former glory and what's there now, your sources describe it as pretty stark.
Very stark. Today, it's basically a windswept, arid waste, inhabited mostly by nomadic Arab tribes, really since the early centuries AD.
A potent reminder, isn't it, of how even the most impressive human creations can fade if that driving spirit disappears.
Absolutely. And the sources mention those earthen hills you see scattered across the valley.
Yeah.
Turns out, incredibly, those are actually the remnants of ancient cities, Babylon included.
Oh, way.
Yep, buried under layers and layers of desert dust accumulated over centuries.
So this magnificent center of the world reduced to basically a heap of dirt, as one source put it. Its name eventually lost until archaeologists dug it up.
It's a humbling thought. This city, built brick by brick, just returned to the earth over something like 2,000 years. Time and the elements are relentless.
Okay, so we've seen the rise, the ingenuity, and the eventual sort of fading away. Now let's dig into those origins. Your sources say the civilization there is among the oldest with definite records. Stretching back, what, 8,000 years?
A staggering length of time, yeah. 8,000 years.
How can we be so sure about dates that far back?
Ugh, this is where it gets really fascinating. Your sources highlight a remarkable bit of detective work. Scientists figured it out partly through Babylonian records describing a solar eclipse.
An eclipse?
Yeah. And modern astronomers could then calculate exactly when such an eclipse would have been visible from that specific region.
Wow. Like a celestial fingerprint.
Exactly. Linking their calendar to ours across millennia.
That's incredible. And the fact that 8,000 years ago, the Sumerians in that area, the early folks we're talking about, were already living in walled cities.
Right.
That's just, they already been developing for a long time before that, right? They weren't just starting out.
Precisely. It implies centuries of prior development, and your sources stress that this early civilization wasn't just old, it was groundbreaking. The Sumerians and their Babylonian successors, they were pioneers.
In what ways?
First engineers, first astronomers, first mathematicians, first financiers, and crucially, the first to have a written language.
That's a huge legacy. Foundational for everything that came after, really. And that written language, you touched on it, wasn't paper. It was those clay tablets. Can you describe them a bit more based on the sources?
Sure. Picture smallish tablets of moist clay, maybe 6 by 8 inches, about an inch thick, give or take.
Okay, can-sized.
Yeah. And while the clay was still soft, they'd use a stylus to press in those wedge-shaped cuneiform characters. Then they'd bake the tablets, maybe in the sun, maybe in a kiln, to make them hard. Permanent records.
So very different from scrolls or papyrus we might think of elsewhere. But the uses, your sources say they were surprisingly broad, kind of like our writing today.
Absolutely. Your material lists basically everything. Legends, poetry, history, royal decrees, laws, property titles, promissory notes for loans.
Like IOUs.
Exactly. And even personal letters sent between people in different cities. It's amazing to think of these little clay bricks carrying so much information across time and distance.
There's even that great relatable example in your sources, a clay tablet from some country storekeeper.
Oh, yeah, the record of swapping a cow for some wheat or something like that.
Yeah. It really grounds this ancient civilization in just everyday life, simple transactions.
It really does. And the sheer number of these tablets that archaeologists have found, entire libraries, hundreds of thousands of them.
Raw.
It gives us this unparalleled window into their daily lives, their business, their thoughts, the personal affairs of ordinary people even.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit to one of Babylon's most famous features, the stuff of legend. Its walls, renowned as one of the seven wonders of the ancient world. What do the sources tell us about these massive fortifications?
Well, your sources mention Queen Semiramis being credited with the earliest walls, though finding actual traces of those or knowing their exact height, maybe 50, 60 feet, is tricky.
Okay, so those are a bit shadowy.
Yeah. But it's the later walls, the more famous ones built by King Nabopolassar and his son Nebuchadnezzar.
Ah, Nebuchadnezzar, the one from the Bible.
That's the one. Those walls are the ones that really capture the imagination. The scale is just, well, immense.
The dimensions described in your sources are mind-boggling.
They really are. Reliable accounts suggest they were maybe 160 feet high.
160 feet, that's like a modern 15-story building.
Exactly. And the total length. Estimates range from 9 to 11 miles long, circling this huge area.
Incredible.
And get this. The top of the wall was supposedly so wide, a 6-horse chariot could be driven along it.
That's almost unbelievable. Just the manpower, the resources. No wonder they were a wonder of the world. So what's left of them today? Can we still see them?
Sadly, very little. Your sources note that mostly just remnants of the foundations and maybe the moat have been found.
Oh, why so little?
Well, natural decay over millennia, obviously, but also the bricks themselves were basically quarried by later people. Arabs, according to the sources, used them for other building projects over the centuries.
Huh. That's kind of ironic, isn't it? This incredible engineering feat dismantled for spare parts, essentially.
Yeah, it is a bit.
Still, given those massive defenses, it's easy to see why Babylon was famous for being tough to conquer.
Yeah.
Your sources mention it withstood a lot of sieges.
Indeed. Those formidable walls, plus presumably a well-trained military, meant it could resist attacks from the major powers of the time again and again.
Imagine the scale of those ancient armies trying to attack.
Yeah, sources mention things like 10,000 horsemen, 25,000 chariots, huge infantry regiments. Planning a siege against a city like Babylon must have been a massive, years-long undertaking.
Really highlights how effective those defenses were. A huge strategic advantage. But Babylon wasn't just a fortress, right? It was a living city inside. Your sources paint a picture of a well-organized place.
Absolutely. It seems to have been a sophisticated urban center. Defined streets, bustling markets with shops, peddlers.
Sounds vibrant.
Yeah, and magnificent temples for their gods. Plus an inner enclosure, even more heavily fortified, just for the royal palaces. That suggests a clear structure, social and administrative hierarchy, designed for both grandeur and function, it seems.
And beyond the buildings and defenses, the Babylonians were skilled craftspeople too, according to your sources.
Yes, definitely. Your material talks about their skills in sculpture, painting, intricate weaving, working gold.
Beautiful stuff, I imagine.
Yeah, and also practical metalworking weapons, farming tools.
Yeah.
Archaeologists have found really exquisite jewelry in the graves of wealthy citizens. Stuff you can see in museums now. Shows real artistic talent.
It's fascinating, that combination of artistic skill alongside the engineering and administration. And your sources also point out they were ahead of the curve with metal tech.
Significantly, yeah.
Yeah.
While a lot of the world was still using stone tools, the Babylonians were among the first to really widely use metal tools and weapons.
That would have given them a big edge, wouldn't it? In farming, war, crafts.
A considerable edge, absolutely.
Right.
It all adds up to this picture of a really advanced society for its time.
And we can't skip over their financial side. Your sources credit them with some really fundamental innovations there.
That's right. They were known as clever financiers, traders. Your sources suggest they basically invented money as a standard means of exchange.
Really? Invented money.
Well, the concept of standardized exchange, yeah. And also using promissory notes, written IOUs, and written titles for property ownership.
Wow. Those are absolute cornerstones of how we do things today. Finance, property law.
Exactly. Think about it. Standardized money, credit notes, land deeds. Pretty fundamental stuff, pioneered way back then.
So this seemingly invincible city, incredibly wealthy, advanced culture, finance, how did it actually fall? Your sources say it wasn't a direct assault on the walls.
No, the story of the fall around 540 BC is actually quite unusual according to your sources. The walls held. They were never breached in that final conflict.
So what happened?
Instead, the king at the time, Nabonidus, was apparently persuaded maybe bad advice to meet the attacking Persian army led by Cyrus the Great in open battle outside the city.
Oh, really? He left the safety of the walls.
Seems so. The Babylonians lost that battle decisively, retreated, and then, consequently, Cyrus and his army were apparently able to just walk into Babylon through open gates. No major fight inside the city itself.
That's almost anticlimactic, isn't it? After all that effort on the defenses, the city falls because of a decision made outside.
It really underscores how crucial leadership and strategy are, maybe even more than just walls. History's unpredictable.
Yeah, and after Cyrus took over.
Well, Babylon's influence started to fade over the following centuries. It remained inhabited for a while, but its power diminished until eventually it was largely abandoned, left to decay and get buried by the desert sand.
So Babylon as a major power faded from the map. But your sources end on a really important note. The physical city might have crumbled, but its ideas, its wisdom, that survived.
Exactly, preserved on those incredibly durable clay tablets.
Right.
So even though the magnificent temples, the towering walls are mostly just dust now, the legacy, their innovations in engineering, astronomy, math, finance, and especially developing writing, that had a profound, lasting impact.
Civilization owes a lot to Babylon.
As your sources rightly emphasize, yeah, we owe a significant debt to what they achieved back then.
So pulling this all together, this deep dive into Babylon, it really shows an extraordinary story of human ingenuity, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Starting with a tough environment, limited resources, they literally engineered a fertile land. They built this powerful, prosperous society through, it seems, smart leadership and constant innovation.
And left this indelible mark on history. Advancements in everything from huge infrastructure projects to abstract ideas like finance and writing.
Exactly. Babylon really stands as this powerful example of our ability to overcome limitations, to create something remarkable through intellect, working together, just sheer perseverance.
Yeah, developing those complex irrigation systems, building a relatively stable, just society for the time, and that crucial step of inventing record keeping. These were all fundamental things that paved the way for so much that came later.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? Consider how those basic principles, innovation, organization, keeping careful records principles the Babylonians demonstrated so clearly, how they still shape our world today, in countless ways, even in fields that seem totally different.
That's a great point.
What modern Babylons are being built right now through similar kinds of human ingenuity, and what lasting wisdom might they end up leaving behind for future generations?
Something to ponder.
That's your thought to carry with you from this deep dive. Thanks for exploring the ancient world with us.